And we are back. So, as a clinical and political, I love this, a psychologist for more than 30 years, Dr. Eileen Borris works with emerging democracies, helping nations of people reconcile century-old conflicts through forgiveness. Fascinating. Well, you're a faculty member of Thunderbird School of Global Management at ASU, president of Forgiveness International, a nonprofit organization. You also have a private therapy practice. Girl, when do you have time to eat or do anything? Anyway, Dr. Eileen Borris, nice to have you with us.
It's so great to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, you have your first book out, and it is Finding Forgiveness, a very, very interesting topic. Why is forgiveness so important?
We have to deal with it in our lives all the time. We see it in our personal lives, we see it in the relationships we have it, and we see it out in the world today. I think about, for example, what's happening in Syria. You've got all these wonderful humanitarian organizations doing their own thing, but they have their own agendas. The Syrian refugees are dealing with going into a foreign country where there's intolerance, where there's anger towards them. That needs forgiveness.
If we want world peace, it sounds like that's kind of a big thing.
Sure, and again, with the Syrian refugees, they want to go home. And when they go home, their country needs to be part of a process of political forgiveness, healing process.
Wow.
And by the way, the United Nations called me in to speak in front of the United Nations General Assembly to speak to leaders on the importance of political forgiveness and the healing of nations. So the leaders recognize the importance of what they need to do.
Well, of course, in America, we have a lot of illegal immigration, and that's a big issue. Obviously, forgiveness, I always think of Ireland, too. I mean, some of these countries that have been just torn, they've hurt each other so much for so many centuries that, you've got to, somehow that's got to get gone.
We've got to break those cycles of violence, and that's what political forgiveness is all about. And even in this country, you mentioned it, we're dealing with so much intolerance around illegal immigration. And all the political candidates are talking about it. And what we need to do is to look at this. I've asked myself, where does the healing begin? How do we do this?
And where?
This country needs political forgiveness.
Well, and I suppose that, political forgiveness is probably, it has to start with forgiveness on a person-by-person basis, because every person has probably some kind of issues. So your book has a 7-step program for letting go of anger and bitterness. So where do people start individually, Dr.
People start by looking at their own anger, acknowledging their anger, learning the lessons from that, and then being willing to walk into someone else's shoes and to understand what's going on from the psychological landscape of that other person. And through that, we begin to change our perceptions, and we learn to forgive.
Do you always know why you're angry? Maybe people don't even realize, why am I so angry? How do you find the roots of whatever it is that will lead you to needing forgiveness?
We ask ourselves that question, and we ask ourselves, what are we accusing that other person of? That opens the door to help us figure out what it is that we're really angry about. And it's usually something within ourselves.
As they say, sometimes it's just a mirror, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, your book, Finding Forgiveness, has an intro by the Dalai Lama. Now, how did that come about?
I was in India giving a training to the Tibetan government in exile and conflict resolution, and I was asked if I wanted to have an audience. So I said yes.
Yeah.
And I mustered up enough courage to finally ask His Holiness, would you write a foreword to my book? And he said, of course, this is something I must do for this important book. And I was so thrilled, I was so honored, I was so excited. It was incredible.
Wow, no kidding. Well, Finding Forgiveness again has been out for a little, and now you've got an audiobook on finding forgiveness. So many people commute, and audiobooks are so amazing because you can listen to this as you're traveling, like if you're having road rage. No.
It's perfect. It's perfect.
Oh, exactly. So this is like a first beginning of learning how to forgive on a personal basis, I suppose, and then if it can kind of spread out, right? But you have an upcoming book. Does this extend your forgiveness topic, Dr. Borris?
Absolutely. When I wrote Finding Forgiveness, I saw the success that people were having and how the personal forgiveness was really making such an impact in their lives. And so I began to think, people can take this and apply it to healing the nations through the work of political forgiveness. And I mean, this is what inspired me. And I want to see this book in every mission at the United Nations and in every embassy throughout the world, foreign embassy throughout the world. I want to get this message out because it's so important.
It would be amazing to live in a world without tremendous conflict, which we always do. Now, you know, you're finding forgiveness as a 7-step program. So this new book, Forgiveness and the Healing of Nations, that also has a place to start. Where do you start with that?
Oh, absolutely. And actually, the place you start is the same, except that when you're dealing with countries, it's about stopping the cycles of violence, that people may not overcome their anger right away, but they can make a commitment to stop the violence and then start engaging with one another to how are we going to move forward where people can live side by side with one another.
Because otherwise it just continues to perpetuate. If the violence is still going on, you can't forgive while you're still being injured.
Exactly.
I suppose at least some extraordinary people might be able to. Most people are not so good at that. So,
but when you know that you're going to stop the violence, you're breaking that cycle and you're beginning to put the past in the past. And as you look at different ways of restorative justice and how to move forward in a healing capacity, then relationships begin to change.
And when's your upcoming book coming out, Forgiveness and Healing of Nations?
Well, hopefully within this year. I have a publisher who's interested at it, and
so
hopefully
beginning
soon.
Finding Forgiveness, start with this one on the personal level. And I have read some of this. I haven't gotten completely through, but it is really fabulous. And I love the foreword by the Dalai Lama. That is just amazing. So, Dr. Eileen Borris, thank you so much for your wonderful work on forgiveness.
It's been a pleasure just to be able to be here with you and to talk about it.
Well, I want to see all those differences in the world that you might just get perpetuated. I love it. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.
And don't go away. When we come back, another wonderful world effort by someone who's giving away free wheelchairs. We'll be right back.